The Galactic University of Kepler Station had seen many species walk its halls over the centuries. Elegant Altarians with their crystalline skin, methodical Zoracs with their 4 arms perfectly suited for complex calculations, and even the rare gas-formed Nebulites who attended lectures through specialized containment suits. But in all its history, the university had never hosted a student from a Class 12 Deathworld until Sarah Chun arrived. Professor Vextai had initially protested the human's enrollment in his advanced xenobiology course. "It's madness," he chittered to the dean, his insectoid mandibles clicking nervously. "Deathworld species are unpredictable, violent. They have no place in civilized academia." But the Galactic Education Council had been clear. Humanity's recent induction into the Galactic Alliance came with certain privileges, including equal access to higher education. So Sarah Chun, barely 19 standard years old and fresh from the hellscape called Earth, found herself sitting in a classroom designed for beings who had evolved under gentle suns and protective atmospheres. She tried to make herself small. In the back row, acutely aware of how the other students gave her a wide berth. Her human physique compact, dense with muscle from a lifetime of fighting gravity twice as strong as the galactic standard marked her as different. Dangerous.Zetrik. Moldar didn't care about political correctness or galactic integration policies. The young Altarian noble had attended the finest preparatory academies, where he'd learned that hierarchy was natural and proper. Deathworlders, he'd been taught, were little more than sophisticated beasts useful, perhaps for manual labor or military service, but certainly not equals in intellectual pursuits. As Professor Vextai droned on about the metabolic rates of silicon base life forms, Zetrik found his attention drifting to the human girl. She sat quietly, taking notes with primitive paper and stylus rather than the neural interfaces the other students used. How quaint? How primitive? The key difference, Professor Vextai was saying, lies in the energy conversion efficiency of carbon versus silicon matrices. Can anyone calculate the theoretical maximum output ratio? Sarah's hand went up tentatively. The professor's compound eyes fixed on her with obvious reluctance. The theoretical maximum would be approximately 1.7 to 1, she said quietly, but that's assuming perfect conditions. In practice, environmental factors would reduce efficiency by at least 30%, making the actual ratio closer to 1.2 to 1. A murmur ran through the classroom. The answer was not only correct, but demonstrated understanding beyond the basic. Curriculum. Professor Vextai's mandibles twitched in what might have been surprise. Zetrik felt a flash of irritation. It was bad enough that this creature was allowed in their classroom, but for it to show off intellectual capabilities above its station, unacceptable. Fascinating, Zetrik said loudly, his crystalline features catching the light as he turned to face Sarah. "I didn't realize Deathworld beasts were capable of complex thought. Tell me, do you also know tricks? Perhaps you can roll over or play dead." The classroom fell silent. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Professor Vextai opened his mouth to intervene, but Sarah spoke first. "I know one trick," she said calmly, her dark eyes meeting Zetrik's without flinching. "I know how to survive on a planet that tries to kill everything on it every single day." Zetrik laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "How delightfully primitive. No wonder your species needed our help to reach the stars." He stood from his seat, his 7-foot frame towering over the other students. "Perhaps someone should teach you proper respect for your betters." He moved with the fluid grace of his species, crossing the classroom in swift strides. His hand, harder than most metals thanks to his crystalline physiology, swept towards Sarah's face in what he intended as a dismissive slap, a casual gesture of dominance that would put the Deathworlder in her place. Sarah Chun had been born on Earth, where the rain was often acidic, where the very air at sea level contained enough oxygen to be toxic to most galactic species, where earthquakes, hurricanes, and volcanic eruptions were considered minor inconveniences. She had grown up in a world where humanity's ancestors had clawed their way to the top of a food chain that included creatures that could crush steel in their jaws. More importantly, she had grown up in a species that had learned to survive not just nature's wrath, but each other's violence. Zethrick's hand was still traveling toward her face when Sarah moved. The human concept of fight or flight was alien to most galactic species, who had evolved in environments where submission or cooperation were the primary survival strategies. They had never needed to develop the explosive burst of adrenaline-fueled reaction time that had kept humanity alive for millions of years. Sarah's left hand came up in a textbook deflection, redirecting Zethrick's slap while her right hand formed a fist. The blow caught the Altarian noble directly in what humans would call the solar plexus, driving upward with all the force her Deathworld trained muscles could deliver. The sound was like crystal breaking. Zethrick's elegant features crumpled as the impact transferred through his crystalline structure. Fracture lines spread across his face like a spider web, his perfect features becoming an abstract sculpture of shattered mineral. He folded over Sarah's fist with a sound like a wind chime falling downstairs, then crumpled to the floor. 3 seconds. That's how long it had taken from the moment Zethrick began his slap to the moment he hit the ground. His face a ruined map of cracks and breaks that would require months of careful healing to repair. The classroom was silent except for Zethrick's whimpering and the sound of Sarah settling back into her chair. She picked up her stylus and continued taking notes as if nothing had happened. Professor Vextai stared at the scene before him, his compound eyes processing what he had just witnessed. In 3 seconds, everything he thought he knew about Deathworld species had been redefined. This wasn't just violence. It was precision, control, and calculated response all rolled into one fluid motion. Perhaps, Sarah said quietly, not looking up from her notes, we should continue with the lesson on energy conversion efficiency. I believe we were discussing practical applications. As the medical team arrived to attend to Zethrick, word of the incident spread through the university's neural networks at light speed. By the end of the day, every student, professor, and administrator on Kepler Station had heard the story. The human girl. 3 seconds. Face unrecognizable dot in the weeks that followed, Sarah Chun found her classes much quieter. Students still gave her space, but now it was the respectful distance accorded to a predator rather than the disdainful avoidance shown to a primitive. Professor Vextai, for his part, began incorporating Deathworld biology into his curriculum, fascinated by the implications of species that had evolved not just intelligence, but the ability to back it up with devastating force. And Sarah? She continued taking notes with her primitive paper and stylus, answering questions when asked, and demonstrating that humanity's greatest strength wasn't just their ability to survive on a Deathworld dot, it was their ability to carry that Deathworld with them wherever they went.